I'm Grant Stern, and this is PINAC Live. We're here tonight to discuss the sad incident causing protests throughout Baltimore, the killing of Freddie Gray, a 25-year-old African-American man who was last seen in normal condition being dragged into a police van in Baltimore the Sunday before last. We're here with former Baltimore PD officer Joe Crystal. Joe was featured in a PINAC story earlier this year called Crossing the Blue Line. And we're also joined by former LAPD officer Alex M. Salazar. Joe, thank you for coming tonight.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And Alex, thank you as well for coming on a second time today. We really
Happy to be
appreciate
here
your
with you.
insight. So, Joe, Alex, briefly, you started an organization called the National Council of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice, right?
It's actually the National Coalition for Law Enforcement Officers for
Okay.
Justice and Accountability.
National Coalition. Okay. Tell me a little bit about why you formed the NCLEOJ.
Well, we formed it because we saw that people like Joe Crystal here didn't have a place to go to talk about what was going on in his department. This isn't a situation that's just unique to Joe. This is happening to officers all over the country that are placed into positions where they have to cover up or face retaliation. And Joe is simply a unique person. He's a leader. He's just got an amazing heart. He's been able to withstand the attacks that have come against him for him trying to do the right thing and for dealing with a subject matter that is so damning and explosive here with what's going on in modern society today.
Okay. Well, Joe, I want for you to tell your story to the audience. And I know that there's some pending litigation going on between you and the Baltimore Police Department because of the extreme allegations and their reaction to something actually fairly similar to what happened in the Freddie Gray incident, where there was a police assault and you testified in court. So, Joe, again, thank you for coming on the program. Please tell us your story in a nutshell about why you left the Baltimore PD.
Well, it all started a couple of years back. I was working as a narcotics detective in East Baltimore at the time. We saw an individual selling drugs on the street. When we approached him, the guy threw the drugs and he ran. There was a foot pursuit. Several minutes after the pursuit, a call came out that somebody in an alley had kicked in the back door of a house in the area that we saw the guy ran. I wasn't in the area. I stayed back with the drugs that the suspect had thrown. He had kicked in the back door. Come to find out, it was the girlfriend of an off-duty cop that was unbeknownst to me and some of the other guys that were working that night.
Okay, so, I mean, is this an unusual thing to have happen, where the police approach a suspect and then there's a chase?
No, that was a regular day in Baltimore, to be honest. From a cop's perspective, it was, you become a cop for the excitement and stuff like that. Those type of things, it happened quite a bit in Baltimore. That you would get into these types of foot pursuits and, car pursuits and things of that nature. So
you said that the pursuit ended, unbeknownst probably to the criminal too, the suspect, the criminal suspect. He wasn't necessarily targeting somebody, but he wound up at the home of an officer. Is that what's going on there?
The officer's girlfriend.
Okay.
The block that he was in, it's about 80 or 90% of vacant homes. So
he didn't have a very good chance of landing anybody's house running into that home.
He just happened that day that the door he kicked in happened to be somebody just living there, let alone the girlfriend of a police officer. So he kicked in like I said, he had kicked in the back door of that home and ran to the basement. Other officers went in and apprehended him. Several minutes later, they came and got me, retrieved the drugs, and brought me back to the house. And they began to move the suspect into the transport wagon, just kind of like in the video of Freddie Gray, that you see him getting moved to what they call a paddy wagon.
Okay. Are these things are paddy wagons used frequently, or do they usually like drive suspects in a car?
every day, what usually would happen in Baltimore is if you make an arrest, you would say, "I get it's called a 1014," is the way you would say it over the radio, and that's basically saying, "I need a transport wagon," and you give the location or wherever it was, and the wagon would either pick the person up and take them to the city jail, or they would take them to the district where they would be debriefed and then taken to the city jail.
Right. Now, in the Freddie Gray incident, and we're going to take a look at the video a little bit later. We're going to discuss some of the officers that are suspended. But in the Freddie Gray video, we see the officers dragging Freddie by the arms, like they have one arm, one hand under each arm, into one of these transport wagons.
Yes, sir.
So what happened in your incident?
They brought the suspect to the wagon, and the wagon was on the way out. At the time, the sergeant was talking to an off-duty officer. I didn't know the officer. I didn't know he was an off-duty. I didn't know who he was or anything at the time. I wasn't paying attention to the conversation. I kind of turned around, just kind of trying to check out, see what's going on. And I hear the sergeant tell the off-duty officer, shake his head yes and say, "Okay, I'll take care of it." At that time, he gets on the radio and he says, puts out his call number and he says, "Have that wagon 10-6, which means stand by." At that time, he says, "Tell him to stand by, bring the prisoner back." So the wagon kind of backs back into the block, and the sergeant goes with some other officers, and they take the guy out of the wagon and go to bring him into the house. The guy makes it beknownst to him that he doesn't want to go into the house, and he fights, not fights to hurt us or anything, but basically he tried to anchor himself, basically not to get into the house.
Right.
The sergeant, doesn't tell us, and at the time, when you're in a situation like that, when you work on a police department, you're talking about a paramilitary organization. At the time, I didn't think of anything. The sergeant had never done anything in my presence before that would have made me think that something was going awry. So, he brought the guy into the house. I stayed at the front of the house. They take him in the back of the home, and it happened very quickly. You hear a loud bang, and then you hear the suspect and the off-duty officer basically engage in a battle of words, basically. They bring the suspect out from the back of the house, and his shirt's ripped open. He's limping. I found out later on he had a broken ankle. They put him into the wagon. Basically that's it. They take him away. That night I tried to report it to a supervisor in my division. That's a hard thing to do, because they don't really train you for if your supervisor makes a mistake, what do you do? Everything they do, if you see something, tell a supervisor.
Now, wait a second. That's actually a very important thing to bring up. There's nothing in the training in Baltimore PD that tells you what to do if a supervisor is breaking the law.
I mean, nothing that I remember having, nothing specific. They did a scenario when I was in the academy, and the situation almost very similar. The guy runs. You're the rookie. There's a rookie officer with a veteran officer. The veteran officer assaults the suspect. What do you do? And they say, your supervisor. They don't actually say, if your sergeant does this, who do you go to? It's just one of those kind of things. What I decided to do was I decided to go to another sergeant I knew within the same division and tell him about what happened.
Okay, so you spoke out to another sergeant in another division about abuse that you witnessed at the hands of one of your supervisors. What was his reaction? What was his initial reaction to that?
First, he was a sergeant in the same division. He was
okay.
He told me basically that if I snitched, my career would be over, and that if I go to internal affairs, I'll be labeled a rat and basically to keep my mouth.
Okay, so did the suspect actually file a complaint with internal affairs himself? Did he go through the channels himself for the broken ankle?
I didn't know about it until later that had happened.
Okay, so the suspect went independently and filed a claim against the officers. And did internal affairs actually ever go to you as part of the investigation since you were there on the scene?
Yes, they did. After I tried to report it to the sergeant, after he told me to keep my mouth shut, what I ended up doing was I went basically when I was off duty. independently because I felt that that supervisor obviously wasn't going to say anything. And I went on and I reported the incident while I was off duty to a narcotics state's attorney that I knew. And that's basically how the ball got rolling with the investigation. Months and months later, I spoke to internal affairs when they questioned me.
So, I mean, how aggressive are these internal affairs investigators in Baltimore? Are they really seeking to bust corrupt cops, or do you feel like they're really looking to excuse violent behavior or failures of policy or failures of the individual officers? Are they? I mean, is this like something where it's a political entity, or is it merely overwhelmed? What's your opinion on that? It's just an opinion.
I mean, to be 100% honest with you, of internal affairs, I kind of have a not a great opinion of them. And my reason for that is, when I reported what was happening as far as the harassment, not getting backed up on the street when I had a dead rat placed on my car, I went to internal affairs. I spoke to the deputy commissioner at the time, and they didn't do anything about it. They didn't do an investigation. I actually never gave a statement, an official statement. Number one rule about policing: without a victim, you can't. There is no crime. Without a statement, there's nothing to investigate. You can't investigate a rape, for example, without a statement. They didn't take a statement from me until 2014.
That's really important to point out, because in a lot of these incidents, there's no statement. In the Freddie Gray incident in particular, there wasn't even a charge. They didn't release their report for over a week. So they could have put anything on there. And, of course, there's no statement. Who was the victim anyway?
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
But as far as the fair stuff goes, I mean, I felt that when they wanted to try to, drum up charges to investigate me, they did that with the quickness. But take the example with the Vincent Kosum incident where you had the Baltimore City officer assault the individual at that bus stop. That happened in June. They didn't get around to doing anything about it until October. So I felt like they kind of somewhat, picked and choosed. And I felt like, when you look at that incident with that officer that assaulted the guy at the bus stop, the glaring thing to me when I saw that was you had two officers there just sit there and not do anything. They didn't try to stop him. They didn't do anything. The sister, got in the middle. And, I think that that's a direct action of what happened with my situation. I think the fact that the way the commissioner and the mayor handled my situation, it sent a message to the community. It sent a message to the officers. It told other officers, if you see something, keep quiet. If you don't, we'll go after you and we'll get rid of you like we did Crystal.
Now, I mean, let me bring Alex back in at this point, because that's a great point. That it wasn't just one bad actor. The old saying goes, they say, oh, it's just always one bad apple. But it wasn't one bad apple. It took one bad apple and two blind apples in the case that you brought up. That's three officers. Alex, how complicit are these officers who are witnessing crimes, who are witnessing official abuse, and failing to speak out?
Well, it's something that's normal behavior. This is called the code of silence, where these officers remain silent and they don't talk about what's going on. With Joe's situation, he's tried to be a good man and as a human being, treating this person as such. And as we can see what's happened here with Baltimore, there's a pattern here now that the police department has to answer for. And if they don't, they can expect these people to rebel and to get crazy out there and to do things that they normally wouldn't do because there's no justice. But there's a bright spot out here. There's police officers that are stepping forward now as we speak. They're also starting to arrest these officers who think it's same day as business as usual mentality. The problem here, what we're dealing with is we're dealing with people who are indoctrinated into this type of subculture, this way of thinking, and that's ultimately what we need to change.
Now, how can your group, the NCLEOJ, help whistleblowers avoid some of the harsh mistreatment, but still help bring change to the system from within, or even if they have to do as Joe, to resign their positions and to move on, but still remain engaged. How can NCLEOJ help with that?
Well, we help individuals, police officers, whistleblowers, who feel that they're alone. Okay, we don't want them to feel alone. We want them to know that someone cares about them, that they're good human beings, and that they should not be demonized for doing the right thing. Once upon a time, they tried to do this to another person by the name of Frank Serpico. Frank Serpico tried to bring to light what was happening in the NYPD, just really bad corruption, things that were going on. And today we're fortunate that right here on this video we have the new Frank Serpico, Joe Crystal, not just a good cop, but a good person, a good human being, who, if you didn't have his wife by his side, he might have gone off the deep end. Who knows? But this is the type of police officer that we're trying to achieve today. To have this type of officer who doesn't just do it because it's the right thing, but because he's a cop. And because he's sworn, literally he takes that, meaning the sworn issue to protect and to serve and to serve the people, to protect the people, not to beat them, not to kill them, not to shoot them. He's a peace officer, a person who brings peace and knowledge and understanding. And we have to have this environment, and that's what we're hoping that NCLOJ, through our website, honestpolice.org, is going to come out and hopefully be able to help other police officers so they know that they're not alone, first of all. And we need to talk about these issues of systemic institutional racism. That is a big issue that's going on there. We need to talk about mental illness for police officers too, PTSD. There's so many things that go on there, but anyhow, that's my take there.
Well, I think that's a great point, and that's definitely something to pursue in another story, just discussing PTSD and its incidence amongst police officers, how it's not really treated in all cases, or even many cases, right? I mean, that's
Well,
like...
yes, we have ticking time bombs right now on our streets that have come back from the United States wars that have been fought in Afghanistan, Iraq, and really bad locations as we speak right now, where our servicemen and women are watching people getting mutilated and blown up. And so it's these people are coming back. We want to treat them good. There are veterans. They've been out there fighting, yet they're coming out here onto our streets. And a lot of them are acting out and going back to that military mindset. We really need to try to change it. And like I said, there's a lot to learn from people like Joe Crystal, like Frank Serpico, Sam Costales, Cheryl Dorsey. I mean, the list goes on and on of friends of mine, people that I know. And I hope the others don't get mad at me. But yeah, that's what's going on here.
So. For our audience, your website is honestcop.org?
Honestpolice.org.
Honestpolice.org. So our viewing audience can find out more at www.honestpolice.org. Now, I wanted to also mention that at PINAC News, we are seeking those who want to break the blue line of silence, but who are afraid of retaliation. Whether you have filed a report or not, photographyisnotacrime.com does have a contact form. And any contact received from John Q. Police will be treated anonymously. That is John Q. Police. You can submit even videos, photographs, anything that happens. If you see it, you're in the police, and you're concerned about retaliation for crossing the blue line, you can go to PINAC or photographyisnotacrime.com/contact and use the name John Q. Police, and we will accept and we will investigate independently your anonymous tips to Photography Is Not a Crime, and if they can be verified factually, they will be featured in PINAC News. Now, let's go back to Joe Crystal. Joe is the former Baltimore PD police officer turned whistleblower. And we've been discussing his particular incident, but I want to turn our focus to the incident that happened the Sunday before last with Freddie Gray, who passed away this past Sunday, 7 days after being arrested without charges by the Baltimore PD. Joe, again, thank you very much for joining us tonight and taking the time out of your evening.
No, not a problem. My pleasure.
So we're going to watch the video together, and I'm going to break it down. We can talk over it. And I want you to kind of break down and just talk over the video and tell us what you see going on, because it's about a minute long. And then we'll discuss some of the other things that have been happening, the report of the suspended officers, and some of the reported facts in the case. So let me cue up this video.
This technology is amazing.
I mean, we can see that Freddie Gray is still talking there. He does look fairly limp as they drag him to the paddy wagon. I mean, he's clearly saying something as they lift him up.
You're muted.
Back on. I'm going to turn that off. Alrighty, so, I mean, in a lot of the video, and there is multiple angles of this, it appears that Freddie Gray is writhing in pain, and he's got, I mean, certainly facial expressions. Joe, I want you to walk me through what you think is going on here with him.
Well, I didn't see the video as it played through. It didn't come through on the connection. But from the videos that I've seen, the one angle that I just actually watched probably before we had spoken, he's on the ground, and you see two officers. The yellow shirts means that they were working bike patrol that day, and that they were taking him from the ground. I could hear him, obviously, like you said, make some sort of noise, and that they ultimately placed him in the wagon from the scene. From where they were to where the district is, I don't know. Usually the wagon is supposed to call out over the radio, you know, what type of person he picked up, male, female, juvenile, whatever the case may be, and where they're headed once they have a prisoner. If they're heading to central booking, if they're headed to the police district, if they're going to another wagon run. So I'm not sure where the wagon was going. But I could tell you from working that area, I worked over a year in West Baltimore, that incident from the buildings, from what it looks like to me, happened very, very close to the Western District, like a mere couple of blocks.
Okay. I mean, is there a history, or have you heard stories of suspects who are in custody in the wagons not being properly, like, fastened into the wagon and kind of beat up along the way, or officers entering the back? I mean, is this something that could have happened? I mean, we really don't have any insight, but have there been prior incidents or?
Not that I'm aware of. You know, I don't know. You know, like I said, I'm not a doctor. And you know, at this time, they've been somewhat scarce with the the facts of the case. I know I read that according to his lawyer that he suffered. It was I believe it said an 80% sever at the spine.
Right.
They're saying, the doctors are saying that some sort of blunt force trauma had to have caused that. I don't know what could have happened that could have caused that. I don't see anything in the wagon that could have just, from him just being placed in the wagon, I don't see how that injury could have been sustained. But
what's the procedure for checking somebody into the wagon? And do the wagons use any cameras?
The new wagons, when I was there, the older wagons didn't have cameras. The newer wagons, it would depend what year. Some of the districts got new camera, got them where they actually have cameras in the back that the driver could see from there. So the question would be, what year was that wagon? That's a question for one.
I mean, but is there a process for transferring prisoners in so that somebody who's in custody is in the care of one particular officer, or do they just load it up and go?
It's a mere seatbelt they're supposed to fasten the person in with, but it's also very easy for that individual to unbuckle himself as well. There are procedures in there. I know from people that I speak to that the police department, right after this incident happened, was making it a point to tell everybody that it was their responsibility to buckle a prisoner in, and was making everybody sign general orders to it. So, that the question would lead me to believe, is that what the, Police Commissioner Batts is already trying to maybe build it toward? Not saying it didn't happen, but this was a mere couple of days after the initial incident before Mr. Gray had passed, and they were already saying to all supervisors, make sure all your officers sign this general order.
Okay, so I mean, maybe this is what happened. Maybe he wasn't buckled in, and then he got injured in transit. It's a theoretical possibility right now, right?
Again, I'm not a doctor, so I couldn't tell you if the injuries are. I mean, who knows?
Who knows? I'm just saying it's like that. It's a little odd that they would make sure that everybody knows the seatbelt policy and signs off on a general order a couple days after somebody went into a wagon and came out ill.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's fair. I mean, I think what we'd have to wait for is the medical examiner's report for one. This is just me as a detective speaking at this point. We'd have to wait for the medical examiner's report to see, what it would say, and see what the other individuals, stated that happened.
Now, to your knowledge, does Baltimore PD carry any body cameras? Do they have taser cameras? Any cameras that they deploy to capture investigations?
They have city watch cameras throughout the city, but the camera from the Vincent Kosum incident where he beat up the guy at the bus stop, that was actually done with the Baltimore City watch camera, manned by the police. The rest of them aren't manned 24/7. So you would need an operator to actually switch to that camera to see what was going on.
Are those videos that Baltimore PD records throughout the city considered public record? Are citizens able to get them from the Baltimore PD easily?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I doubt it. I doubt anything is easy to get. I know when I had my incident where they said that you hear me call for backup and my unit's not responding, that they say they were going to be able to get the tapes, but I never actually heard them actually getting it. And after a certain amount of time, I believe it's 90 days, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 60 or 90, they destroy the tapes. So if nobody requests them, say goodbye.
Well, can you tell our audience a little bit about Baltimore's public records requirements and laws? What are the requirements for record keeping and for turning those records over to citizens who request them?
When I worked, all I really ever dealt when I was in patrol for a short period of time was more with like just accident records. I know
Sure.
Charge for those accident records and stuff like that. As far as the public safety and the Freedom of Information Act, that was something that we actually didn't deal with as a regular foot on the ground officer. That was done through our public information office. And again, with that stuff, I've heard that they were it was somewhat hard to get a hold of some of those things.
So the Baltimore Sun reported the list of officers, which I pulled up and closed. The list of officers who were suspended for this incident. I'm pulling up the Baltimore Sun right now so we can take a look at this. It's there's 6 officers, 3 by bicycle, 1 transport driver, and the two officers who were called to check up on Freddie Gray in the back of the van. They are Sergeant Alicia White, 30 years old, and a member of the department since 2010. Officer Caesar Goodson, 45 years old, on the force since 1999. Officer William Porter, 25 years old. Officer Garrett Miller, 26 years old. Officer Edward Nero, 29 years old, all joined Baltimore PD in 2012. I know there's always a lot of talk about the bad apple theory, but are there any bad apples in that bunch? Because that's half a dozen officers all involved and all suspended because of the death of Freddie Gray. Are there any known abusers in that group or people that drew a lot of internal affairs complaints?
They didn't come on. You got to think if they were hired in 2012, they spent 6 months in the academy, another couple of months in field training, a couple of months walking foot. I left in 2014. Most of those officers didn't come on until 2012, when basically by that time I had kind of shoot and hidden away. So, by the time that they came out, I never, more than most of those people, I don't even think I've ever met, to be honest.
Sure. I mean, it's a big department too. How many officers in Baltimore PD roughly?
Roughly, I think last time I checked, I want to say, I can't remember if it was, I think maybe 2,800.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it's a fairly sizable force. I mean, to put it in perspective, I think NYPD has about 34,000, and they're the largest PD in the country. So, 2,800 is a fairly sizable number.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, what is it about Baltimore PD's culture that enables this kind of cover-up? Because it happens in a lot of places, but I can tell you personally that we've covered Baltimore so frequently in the last 12 months, and part of that is the Department of Justice investigation. What is it about Baltimore that lends itself to these kinds of incidents? Because they've really been piling up recently.
Well, I have two trains of thought on that, if you don't mind hearing them.
We're here to listen.
My train of thought would be, when I spoke to the FOP president at the time about my incident and basically asked him for help and told him what was going on, I actually told him I'm in fear for my safety. He said to me that the reason people were mad at me was because this is blood in and blood out, and they were upset with me that I basically spoke forward. And that's very profound. I worked gang intelligence for a period of time on there. And I believe that when you say something like that, that's a gang mentality. Mm-hmm. And you're basically, at that point, you're taking on the role of what you're supposed to be policing. At that point, we're not cops when we take on that type of mentality. We are becoming gang members, and we're becoming what we're supposed to be policing ourselves. That's my first train of thought.
That's scary enough. I mean, when you think about the mentality that you're talking about, but when you see the individual incidents and they're starting to pile up and actually be uncovered, it seems pretty plausible. So let me hear your second train of thought.
My second train of thought is, and I don't want to point fingers at anybody or anything like that. So I mean this with the utmost respect when I say this, but I was in the military, I served in the military for 6 years. I'm a strong proponent on that. Whoever's at the top is supposed to be your leader, and the people at the bottom learn from the person on top. And you take your P's and your Q's from that person, and the numbers, to me, the best thing about a cop is you need to have integrity, and the number two thing is you need to be accountable. You make a mistake, you say you make a mistake. We're cops, we're not perfect. I kind of find it kind of hard to believe that Stephanie Rollins Blake, the mayor of Baltimore City, when she hired Police Commissioner Batts, that you put an individual at that spot when, I didn't know it at the time when I was going through mine, but that he had a history of, not supporting people that were in my situation. And I believe that sends a bad message to other police officers throughout. The way they handled my situation gave a message to police and a message to the community. The community, it says, simple, we don't want these type of cops. The community hears about something I did, they respect that an individual standing up and holding other officers accountable. He has integrity, the two things we just discussed. What does that tell to other officers? We don't want this guy. This is the type of police we want. He needs to go. And when you look at his history and his track record of things like that, to me, I think that's why you're seeing all these incidents now pile up, because it's not coming from the bottom and going up. It's starting at the top and rolling down.
Well, I mean, this is the same chief of police who requested the Department of Justice to come in and investigate the force, right?
Well, I mean, it depends how you look at the double-edged sword, sir. Yes, he did, and that's great. But let's also look at it. What prompted that? The media prompted that. If Mark Puente from the Baltimore Sun hadn't done this story and kind of hit him off guard with it, do you think they would have done that? Do you honestly think that they didn't have that incident? I mean, just look at the track record, for example. When my story came up, when my incident came up, what was said? I didn't know about the incident. I had no idea this incident had transpired, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, I met with the number 2 in charge, so I guess you're saying that those people didn't communicate. Look at the Vincent Kosum incident at the bus stop. What did they say happened? There was a breakdown in communication. I was never made aware of this. So look at the Mark Puente story. Mark Puente does a story about all these different cases, about police brutality and stuff like that. What's the answer? Well, I didn't know about it. With all due respect, Commissioner Batts, it's your job to know about these things.
Well, isn't that something that people hear from police officers, which is that ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking the law? I mean, it's one of those legal concepts I think everybody hears all the time.
Well, if for speeding, you can't tell me I didn't know it was against the law. You would still get a ticket for it. So.
Right. Or, I mean, in this case, some of the things that we've talked about are just, they're deliberate breaches of professionalism and of the law, and in the name of something that you mentioned, which is a gang mentality. So where do you think that we can find change in the short term and then in the long term? How do we go about this? Because the big problem is that they're checking all the boxes. Oh, we have policies for everything. But if you can't get the government to follow its own policies, where do we start?
I think it's a two-part. I think and it might come across like an easy answer, but my opinion is that we need to instill integrity back into the police departments. We need to make integrity mean something. Like I talked about accountability. We need to have accountability not just for ourselves, but for our leaders as well. They need to have their pulse on what's going on. I think that we need to have strong leaders in place that can be followed, not people with all these questionable backgrounds and things like that. You're not gonna get anything from that. You need to lead from the front. You can't lead from the back. And I think we need solid leaders and mentors, and we need to instill integrity in the police department. We need to make sure that that's as an officer, that should be your number one priority. You have integrity, period. Number 2, accountability. Like I said, I'm not perfect. Is it feasible that I could, do something as an officer and make a mistake? Before, both my parents were both police officers, and something that my parents used to tell me is when I became a cop is you're a man before you're a cop. What that tells me is I'm not a god and I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
So for me, is it possible I can make a mistake? Yes. If you make a mistake, you own that mistake. You don't sit there and try to, cover it up or sit there and try to put a spin on it. That's no different than the people that break the laws do. We're supposed to be better than that, and we need to hold ourselves to a higher accountability.
So what is your advice for an officer who's concerned about retaliation and wants to cross the blue line, wants to do the right thing, and wants to seek change in their local police department?
For one, I mean, maybe this is somewhat harsh for me to say. If you're in Baltimore that I could speak of, I know it's going to be rough, and I know it's probably rough in many other departments. I would say, reach out to those who you care about for support. Reach out to people like Alex who have an idea and can maybe put you in touch with other people for support. Seek counseling for yourself. Seek counseling for your family, because when I went through this wasn't just something I went through. This is something my wife had gone through. She had to deal with the idea of hearing that her husband didn't get backed up on the street. The mayor did a story today, and she actually said about Baltimore City. She said that this is a violent city with a history of brutality. To me, that's profound. So you take a story like me not getting backed up or something like that. God forbid if something happened to me, what would have happened to my wife? And I just think it's important for those people that, want to cross, look, nobody can make you do it. It's got to be something that you do when you're ready. And if that's the case, seek help from people like Alex, seek out help from your family, and just be strong and enduring. To me, I never realized it was going to get as bad as it did. In my heart, I thought it was going to, there might be some consequences, but it's going to blow over like everything else in life. I never anticipated that, the department from the top to the bottom would come at me with such fury. And that would be the thing I would tell people is prepare yourself for the worst. Don't think it's going to be easy, because it's going to be the hardest thing you ever go through in your life.
Now, that said, let's talk about what's happened since then. We can't obviously talk about the details of pending litigation, but you can tell us the broad brushstrokes of what you've done to rectify the situation and how you've moved on.
Well, my wife and I had to, I'm sure everybody knows that when I was leaving the department, the police department basically tried to give me a settlement agreement basically saying never talk about this and we'll drop a bogus investigation that we launched into you. And you could find copies of that on the internet anywhere of that. So that tells me first that the department knew what they did to me was wrong. Secondly, with the help of my lawyers, Don DeCepolo, Nick Pedalakis, I filed a lawsuit. And the lawsuit, I did that for basically the reasons I said is I'm hoping that this lawsuit will help instill integrity back into the police department. So it will try to hold people accountable for what happened with me and maybe make it easier for another cop if they see something wrong that they feel that they could come forward. Because right now I have cops that tell me that they're scared to come forward. So, when I'm hoping that's what'll happen. My wife and I had to move out of state to get away from everything in Maryland, which kind of broke our heart because we loved it there. We loved our home. We loved our family. I'm working now in a small sheriff's department in Florida. In the meantime, I guess just trying to start over.
Well, Joe, again, thank you very much for taking the time out of your night to speak with us at PINAC News. And Alex, thank you very much for coming on the show twice today and sticking with it and, plowing through some technical difficulties. And one more time, I do want to tell everybody who's out there watching this that at PINAC News, we will professionally and independently investigate all claims. And we do accept anonymous tips from police officers who are afraid of the consequences of crossing the blue line. You can send those tips to photographyisnotacrime.com/contact. There's a contact form and it asks for your information. You put in John Q. Police and we will professionally and independently investigate it. That means that we'll use your state's public records laws to independently verify your claims or to independently verify the records that you send us, because that is part of the difficulty of investigating police abuse, getting public records from these agencies, sometimes even getting them to follow court orders. So, again, one more time, Joe, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, sir.
We wish you the best of luck. And Alex, thanks for coming on again tonight.
Thank you.
You guys have a great night.
You have a great night, Joe. Take care.
All right. Take care, guys. Thanks.
Good night, Alex.
All right.
I'm Grant Stern, and this is PINAC News. Be the media.